Hello, Victor, Yvonne, and Oscar. I would just like to welcome you to the league. And as I understand, American football is a little bit foreign to you. I'd like to explain the basics so that basically can follow the game from both a fan's point of view and from a player in fantasy football. Okay, and I apologize for talking quietly, but my wife is sleeping in the room next door. This is what an American football field looks like. And I hope you can see the cursor there in the center of the field. It's 100 yards long from what we call goal line, which is right here, this line here at the end on the left. And then this line here is also the goal line. So the object is to take this football and advance it but by either running it or throwing it to a player who catches it and then tries to run and put the ball into this section, which is called the end zone. Okay, when you cross the goal line here with the ball, it's called a touchdown, and that's the major way to score in American football. Okay, so the way it works is let's say you start with the ball here on what's called the 45-yard line. Each one of these ticks here is a yard. So this would be 5 yards from here to here and 10 yards from here to here. So if the team is starting with the ball on this yard line, the 45-yard line, and let's say they run the ball and they run it 2 yards and then he gets tackled. Okay, that's called a down because the player was tackled and put down. Okay, if his knee touches the ground while he's holding the ball, he's considered down. Or if he's holding the ball and let's say he falls on the ground holding the ball, like his chest is on top of the ball, that would also be considered down. So let's say the second play or down, they run the ball and they get stopped here. Okay, and let's say the third play, they get the ball here. So now they've gone 8 yards, but in order to continue possession of the ball, they need to get 10 yards. So let's say they ran it again on fourth down, on their fourth try, and they got to here, so they got past the 10 yards. Then what's called first down would start all over again. And they again have 4 chances to advance the ball 10 yards to here. If the defense stops them after 3 downs, they have the choice of what's called punting, where the player kicks the ball by holding it in his hands, and he kicks it in the air to the other team, who can then start running this way with the ball. So that's the basics of it. And let's say they get very close and they're stopped. They can do what's called a field goal, where they place the ball on the ground and the player kicks the ball from the ground through these uprights, these are actually 2 poles. You can't see the poles, but these here are poles, and that would be 3 points. Okay, so the main ways to score are running the ball or catching the ball in this section, or kicking the ball through these uprights. This is called a touchdown, and when it goes through here, it's called a field goal. In football scoring, this would be 6 points for a touchdown and 3 points to kick it through here. And I know very little about rugby, but I think about rugby, if you get close, you can kick the ball through here rather than run it in here. So I'm not sure if Spain has rugby, but I just thought you might find that similar. After a touchdown, you can then kick the ball through here for what's called an extra point, 1 point, or you get the ball on this 2-yard line and you can run the ball in for 2 points, or you can pass it in for 2 points. Okay, so it's touchdown, kick for an extra point, that's 1 point, and that's usually what happens. So usually a touchdown is 7 points. And then let's say you advance the ball from here and then you get stopped here. You could then kick the ball through these uprights for 3 points, and that's called a field goal. Okay, so this is the basics of the NFL field. Okay, um, the offensive team is trying to move the ball this way, and the defensive team is trying to stop them. Okay, and if they stop them advancing 10 yards, then the other team either kicks the ball through the air to the other team, or they try to get that extra yardage, and if they're stopped short of the 10 yards, then the other team takes over. So I hope that is clear. I think I covered a lot of ground there, more than I wanted to, but let's see how this goes. I'm going to keep going. So that's the basics of how the field looks. And just so you know, this is 100 yards from here to here. There's 10 yards from this goal line to the end zone, and this section is called the end zone, to the end line, they call this. So the whole field is like from here to here is 120 yards, just about what a World Cup soccer field is, about as long. But it's a little more narrow. It's only 53 yards, 53.3 yards from here to here. Okay, so that's the field. Now let's go with the positions. Okay, these are called X's and O's. Typically the O's represent the offensive players and the X's represent the defensive players. Now each team has 11 players on the field at any one time. Okay, now if this were the football, this line here, I made it dotted because it's imaginary. It's called the line of scrimmage. The line of scrimmage is this imaginary line that is really at the nose of the football, and it creates a zone where there's a 1 yard zone where these guys can't enter. They can't come within 1 yard of the offensive players, and vice versa, until the ball is actually snapped and put in play. Okay, so let's go over the positions, because that's what you really need to know. This gentleman here is called the center. These two guys are called the tackle. This would be the right tackle and the left tackle. This would be called the right guard and the left guard. These 5 gentlemen here are what are called the offensive linemen, and these are typically your enormous guys. Most of these guys are 300 pounds or more, and they're also tremendous athletes. Even though they're 300 pounds, they're very fast and very strong. And their main job is to block for either the guys running the football or the quarterback passing the football. Okay? This is called the quarterback. And if you look, it's all in relation, all the positions are named in relation to this line of scrimmage. So he's about a quarter of the way back from that line of scrimmage. So, I'm sorry, this is the quarterback. So he's about a quarter of the way back. Okay? And then this gentleman here is a runner. He is called a running back or a halfback. He's halfway back, okay? And he would take the ball. So the center always snaps the ball to the quarterback. So that's how a play is started. This guy, he takes the ball, he puts it between his legs, and the quarterback gets it. Okay? Now the quarterback then will do one of two things. He'll either hand it off to this guy or this guy, and these guys will try to run the ball, or he'll drop back and he'll try to pass the ball, usually to this guy or this guy. Okay? So, and this last guy here is called a fullback. Now this is usually a very fast guy, and this is usually a very large guy. So this guy does a lot of blocking, and this guy does a lot of running. But they're both called running backs, and in fantasy football, they don't really make a distinction. Either this guy or this guy would just be a running back. So it's also denoted RB. Okay? Now this guy here is called a tight end. And why is he called a tight end? Well, if you look, if this is considered the line here, and this is considered the offensive line, this guy is very tight to the line. Thus the name tight end. And he's also, if you'll notice, he's on the end of the line. So this position is called the tight end. That's also one of the key positions in fantasy football. Okay, this guy does two things. On a running play, he will block for this guy or this guy who's running the football. And on a passing play, he'll run out here and try to catch the ball. So he does both blocking and running. Now these two guys are very important fantasy football guys. These are called the wide receivers. Okay, and if you'll notice, again, their position name is in relation to where they stand here. If the ball is here, these guys are very wide. They're way out there and they're way out here. So what they typically do is they run what's called a route, where they run down the field. They might run like this and then cross over the middle, and the quarterback tries to pass them the ball. Or they might run what's called a fly pattern, where they run deep and the quarterback's trying to throw the ball to them way out here. Okay, so these again are your major positions in football. And in fantasy football, this guy, and in real football, this is the most important guy on the team. This is the quarterback. You might have heard of Peyton Manning. He's like probably one of the best quarterbacks in the league. And mainly he's going to drop back, he's going to either hand off or he's going to pass to these guys. So in fantasy football, you're going to always play one quarterback and two running backs. And then you're going to also play two wide receivers. And you're going to play one tight end, and then something called a flex. A flex is not a real position. What a flex means is you can choose any one of an extra wide receiver, an extra running back, or an extra tight end. So when you hear flex, it's not a real position in the NFL. It's just a fantasy denotion, which means you will choose one of these three players. Okay, and I would write down their names, but when I started writing the names down, it was too confusing. So I'd rather just show you what they are. Okay, so again, I'm going to say this is the quarterback, this is your halfback and your fullback, both called running backs. These two gentlemen run with the ball. This guy either passes the ball or he hands it off to these guys. And occasionally a few of these guys will also run the ball themselves without handing it off. A guy like Colin Kaepernick on the San Francisco 49ers, he has that. But in the NFL, often this guy does not run the ball much at all. These two guys are called wide receivers because they're wide out from the line. And they catch the ball. That's a very important statistic in fantasy football. And this gentleman here is called a tight end because he's tight to this line here, this offensive line. He's very close to it. This is usually a very large guy. He's usually bigger than these guys. These guys can be small and fast guys. This guy is usually at least 250 pounds. And his job, and why does he have to be big? Because he's blocking some very big guys over here, which I'll get to in a minute. Okay, so that's the offense. Again, quarterback, running backs, wide receiver, tight end. And just so you know, this tight end can line up on this side or he can line up on this side. Alright, so 11 players on the field, 5 guys that mainly block, and then these are called the skill positions: the wide receiver, running backs, tight end, and quarterback. And the skill positions are the guys that really count because they get the statistics. Okay, now on the defense, think of it in 3 major groups. These are called your down linemen. And again, why are they called linemen? Because they're very close to this line of scrimmage. Okay, these are called your linebackers. These guys are normally your biggest guys. These guys are your second biggest guys. And why are they called linebackers? Because if this is the line and they're playing behind it, they're backing the line. This guy's called a cornerback and this guy's called a cornerback, and their main job is to guard the wide receivers over here. And these guys are called your safeties because look, if you get past everyone, you need someone safe. You know, they're called a safety because they're the last resort. They're the last guy on the field to make a tackle. So this guy is often called the strong safety because he plays on the same side as the tight end. This is a tight end here. This guy would be called the free safety. So let's say the tight end lined up over here. This guy, who's, let's say, the bigger guy, the strong safety is usually bigger, he would line up over here and this guy would move over there. But if you look at the three major categories, you have linemen, whose job is to come after the ball. Linebackers, who either on a running play they come in and make a tackle, on a passing play they might drop back to make a play. So these guys are kind of hybrid. They either come in really fast or they might drop back. And these guys are always pretty much covering the pass. If a run comes in and it gets past these guys, then they're the last resort. But usually these guys are going to stop your passes. Okay? So you got cornerback, strong safety, and free safety. Okay? So in terms of major categories, linemen, linebackers, and these four guys are together called defensive backs, DBs, defensive backs. Okay? So in fantasy football, you don't really worry too much about the individual defensive players. You're picking an entire defense. Okay? So on offense, you pick each of the individual skill positions: wide receiver, tight end, quarterback, and 2 running backs. Those 7 skill positions. Or I'm sorry, those are 6 skill positions, and then 1 flex, which would be any one of this, these 2, or this. So you're worried about those guys. And on defense, you're just trying to pick a defense that's good overall. So fantasy football doesn't really spend too much time on defense. It's more on the offensive skill players. Okay, so I hope I'm not going too much into it, but I wanted you guys to at least know what it looks like. Okay. And then let's go now to, oops. Sorry, I thought I had this on here. Thought I had this set up. 1 second. Okay, this is, sorry about that, guys. This is the actual ESPN application. Let me get this a little clearer. It's not very clear for some reason.